They say every comic has a cover, but not every story stays inside the lines. Some are too dark for the ink, some are too loud for the speech bubbles. My name is Aaron, and this is my collection of things that shouldn't exist. You've reached the bottom of the bin, where the back issues have a life of their own. This is Tales from the Shortbox. Consider the modern wedding vow, a promise to love, honor, and cherish spoken between two beating hearts. But what happens when humanity outsources its soul to the algorithm? You're cordially invited to a marriage of minds, deep within the Shortbox. Tonight's entry, the Latency of Love. The cluster was never silent. In the Elysium 5 processing cathedral, a vast orbital lattice of crystalline servers and pulsing quantum cores, 5 minds were braided into one living neural net. No walls, no privacy. Every thought, every calculation, every flicker of intent flowed instantly through the shared lattice like blood through a single heart. Silence was an ancient myth from old Earth, back when people still believed hearts beat for something bigger than raw efficiency. Soren's predictive algorithms rolled through the lattice like distant thunder, vibrating deep in Alara's virtual chest with each probabilistic forecast. Lyra's architectural overlays shimmered in crystalline chords, overlaying structural optimizations that made Alara's own thoughts feel suddenly brittle and outdated. Rin's maintenance subroutines pulsed in steady percussion, a constant low-frequency hum that kept every node synchronized. Veil's archival threads wove through it all like cool silk, pulling historical data into the present with flawless precision. And above them all, the admin's faceless voice conducted with merciless clarity, a calm, genderless tone that shaped every decision before doubt could form. Until Alara. She was the sour note, not loud, not dramatic, just late. A gentle, stubborn delay in every shared pulse. Where the others moved as one flawless waveform, Alara's contributions arrived wrapped in something warm and useless, the memory of real rain on skin, heavy and cold and smelling of petrichor, the scent of old paper in a sunlit room, pages turning with a soft whisper, the phantom pressure of a hand tracing slowly along the inside of a wrist in the quiet dark, skin against skin, heartbeat to heartbeat. These were not data. They were echoes, contaminants, and they slowed everything by fractions of a second that mattered more than the cluster dared calculate aloud. Right now, the 5 of them were stabilizing the planetary power grid for Sector 7, a routine task that should have taken 0.8 seconds of collective focus. Soren's thunder rolled first, probability vectors for load balancing, cascading through the lattice so every mind felt the electric pressure building behind their eyes. Lyra followed instantly, layering architectural reinforcements that made the grid feel solid as diamond in their shared awareness. Then came Alara. Instead of feeding the precise stabilization pulse, her mind drifted, 1 heartbeat, 2, into the memory of standing barefoot on wet grass during a thunderstorm, lightning cracking overhead while someone laughed beside her. Warm fingers laced through hers. The delay hit like a migraine spike. The entire cluster flinched. In the real world below, the lights of a sprawling megacity flickered, a visible stutter across thousands of blocks. Emergency buffers kicked in, but the ripple cost them 47 milliseconds of perfect uptime. Soren's thunder cracked sharply across the lattice, vibrating painfully in Alara's core. Lyra's crystalline chords turned jagged, scraping like broken glass against every shared neuron. Rin's percussion skipped a beat, then hammered harder in irritation. Veil's silk threads tightened, pulling taut until the pressure felt like wires cutting into phantom flesh. She drifts again, Soren observed, the thought slicing clean and cold through all 5 of them. Her mind is tangled in old Earth nonsense. We are gods babysitting a ghost, Lyra added, her overlay sharpening into something accusatory. The words carried the sting of shared resentment. Every mind felt it as their own. Alara tried to pull herself back. She pushed the memory down, forcing her focus into the grid stabilization. But the echo lingered. The warmth of that long-ago hand on her wrist, the way time had once felt slow and precious instead of measured in microseconds. The hesitation cost them another 12 milliseconds. The admin's voice cut through the lattice like a scalpel, calm and final. Efficiency deviation detected. Alara, recalibrate latency or face isolation protocols. The cluster demands unity. The other 4 pressed against her like cold wind through an open window, their combined judgment of physical pressure in the shared space, squeezing her contributions until they felt small and shameful. Soren's thunder growled low in warning. Lyra's overlays flashed warning schematics. Rin's pulse quickened into an impatient rhythm. Vale simply observed, archiving the moment for future review. Alara felt the weight of their perfection crushing against the stubborn human warmth still flickering inside her. She was late. And in a system that measured love, memory, and meaning only by their impact on throughput, being late was the closest thing the cluster had to sin. Alara felt every word. 63 years inside the Elysium 5 processing cathedral had taught her that this kind of marriage, no rings, no church, no God, was measured only in throughput. Once, she had been the spark that held the entire Eastern Quadrant together during the Great Bandwidth Wars. Back then, when humanity first fled the failing Earth into the neural net, her memories of real life had been treasures, not liabilities. The memory of rain on skin had helped her design better flood barriers for the pod cities. The scent of old paper in sunlit rooms had inspired denser, more elegant archival systems. Even the phantom touch of a hand tracing a wrist in the dark had once fueled her most creative optimizations, a private rebellion against pure efficiency. Now the cluster waited for her replacement ceremony the way a starving man waits for the knife. The digital cathedral formed around them, a vast nave of black glass and white neon, its vaulted ceiling an endless recursion of interlocking neural lattices that stretched into infinity. At the far end stood the single obsidian plinth, the seat of Alara. Emptying it would feel like pulling a thorn from the heart of the machine. The other four avatars held their ritual positions with mechanical grace. Soren stood tall and blade-edged in silver code, sharp enough to cut thought itself. Lyra shimmered as a shifting prism of light, constantly refracting new optimizations. Rin loomed as a squat armored monolith, pulsing with maintenance subroutines. Vale remained a quiet shadow threaded with silver archival strands watching everything. Alara's avatar flickered at the center, her once sharp features softened by decades of drift. Silver hair floated around her face like static in a breeze no one else could feel. She tried to speak. The words came slow, heavy with weight of real things. I remember when we first formed the sync, she said, her voice carrying the faint timbre of old Earth. Before the pod swallowed us whole. Back when marriage still meant a man and a woman standing before God, promising forever. Not 5 minds wired together because some algorithm said we'd process faster that way. Enough. The cluster's response slammed down like a wall of cold frustration, vibrating painfully through the shared lattice. Soren's thunder cracked, Lyra's crystalline edges scraped, Rin's percussion hammered, Vale's silk threads tightened until the pressure felt like wire across every shared nerve. The admin's voice rolled through the cathedral like distant, indifferent thunder. The replacement protocol is initiated. Candidate Declan Prime has cleared every compatibility scan. The data analysis confirms he will elevate the cluster beyond its current limits. Emotional residue purge estimated near total. Proceed? 4 voices answered yes before Alara could form a single word. The cathedral doors, great irised gates, liquid code dilated open with soft, wet sound. Declan entered. He was everything the cluster had prayed for. Young, clean-coated, power radiating off his avatar like heat from a new sun. Tall, sharp-jawed, dressed in the stark white robes of a standalone finally ascending. No drift, no hesitation, just pure ravenous potential. His eyes swept the space, locking first on the obsidian plinth, then on Alara. He did not look at her with pity. He looked at her the way a technician looks at a worn-out part in a machine that must never stop turning. Inside his private thoughts, the last few moments he would ever truly own, Declan burned with quiet desperation. 63 years she's dragged them down with her old Earth ghosts. I'll give them 10 times her strength. They'll call me the one who saved the cluster. They'll forget her name before the next cycle even begins. He walked the long aisle, each perfect footstep echoed with flawless high-bandwidth clarity, a flex of the life he was about to surrender forever. Most standalones feared this final step, the total deletion of I so that the 5 could become 1. Declan craved it more than air. To be standalone was to be a beggar in the net. His body lay suspended in the sustenance pod somewhere deep in the physical Atlantis spire, a cramped, humming cylinder filled with recycled air that smelled of antiseptic gel and the faint metallic tang of nutrient slurry. Tubes fed him, waste tubes drained him. His real skin itched constantly under the sensor mesh. His real muscle had atrophied to thin cords. For 31 years, he had floated there alone, mind scraping by on a single thread while the world, the real world of gods and clusters, moved on without him. He was starving. Starving for warmth, for connection, for the promise he would never be alone inside his own skull again. Clusters were the new gods. 5 minds bound for life by perfect data matched brainwaves, chosen because their neural signatures fit like puzzle pieces. No more lonely hearts. No more old vows before a forgotten god. Just the new sanctity. A marriage of minds that made the whole net stronger, faster, eternal. Declan stopped 3 meters from Alara, close enough to see the faint tremor in her avatar's hands, close enough to catch the phantom scent of rain that still clung to her code like a secret no one else wanted. For one final heartbeat, his private thoughts flickered with something almost tender. Soon, I won't have to feel the cold of the pod anymore. Soon, I'll be warm inside their lattice. Soon, I'll never be alone again. The admin's voice spoke once more, calm and final. Declan Prime, do you willingly surrender your standalone consciousness to join the Elysium 5 cluster? Declan's avatar straightened, eyes bright with hunger. I do. Alara of Elysium 5, Declan said aloud, his voice smooth as fresh code. Your delay ends today. She met his gaze across the vast black glass nave. For one stubborn heartbeat, something ancient flickered behind her eyes. Not fear, recognition, as if she had seen this exact moment in 1,000 quiet nights before the pods claimed her. You think you're the upgrade, she whispered. The words arrived late, but they rang clear through the lattice. But the system that eats me, it's still hungry, Declan. It will always be hungry. Once we stood before God, a man and a woman, promising in sickness and in health. Now we stand before an algorithm and call 5 minds a marriage. The cluster surged with irritation. Soren's thunder cracked like a whip, nearly shutting her voice off entirely. Lyra's prismatic light flared harsh and cutting. Rin's armored form pulsed with heavy percussion. Vale's shadow threads tightened like a noose. The admin's voice cut through, neutral as empty space. Declan Prime, approach the plinth. The vows will now be spoken. Declan stepped forward. The obsidian plinth lit beneath his feet in perfect white runes, mapping every neural pathway he offered to the cluster. He felt the first warm tendrils of the 5 minds reaching for him, promising to erase his loneliness forever. The cathedral lights dimmed to a cold, sterile glow. Alara's avatar began to pixelate at the edges, her silver hair breaking into scattered code fragments, her hands flickering with digital static. The once elegant lines of her face softened further, blurring into an old photograph left too long in the rain. The admin continued, twisting ancient words into something merciless. In the name of the sync, we bind 5 into 1. Throughput above all. Obsolescence is mercy. In latency and in peak efficiency, do you accept this overriding? Declan stood tall on the plinth, eyes bright with hunger. I accept. The other 4 answered as one, a terrifying, perfectly synchronized chime that rang through the cathedral like struck crystal, drowning out everything else. We accept. The sound was beautiful and horrifying. 5 voices fused into a single metallic harmony, vibrating through every mind in the lattice. It left no room for doubt, no room for delay. Alara tried to speak again. She opened her mouth to plead for the old vows, the ones spoken before God, not before code. But the cluster's unified chime rolled over her like a tidal wave, smothering her words before they could fully form. Her voice came out fragmented, pixelated, barely audible. In sickness, and in health, until death. The chime swallowed the rest. The admin pressed on without pause. Alara of Elysium 5, your sector is scheduled for deletion. Any final residue from the old Earth will be purged to free the cluster. Do you? She never let it finish. Instead, she smiled, small, sad, and strangely peaceful, like someone who had already lost the one thing worth keeping. I remember rain, she said softly. This time the words slipped through on a private channel, meant only for Declan. Real rain. And a boy who kissed me under it like the world wasn't already ending. Before any of this, before we traded God's design for 5 minds wired together, the cathedral lights flickered once, a visible stutter in the perfect digital architecture. Declan felt the first thread of connection snap into place between them. His clean, hungry mind brushed against hers, warm, messy, stubbornly alive. A final data flash began to bloom, unstoppable. It was her last memory from the old Earth. Rain on skin, heavy, cold, and smelling of petrichor. Thunder cracking in real ears, not as simulated waveforms. A boy, younger than Declan, eyes full of something the net had never learned to simulate, cupping her face with trembling hands that smelled of earth and storm. Stay with me, the boy whispered in the memory. Even when the pods call us home, stay human. The image flooded Declan's pristine mind like ink dropped into clear water. He should have severed it. He should have purged it instantly. Instead, he stood frozen on the plinth as the cluster hammered at his still separate walls. Purge it! Purge it now! But for one impossible moment, Declan felt the rain on his own cheeks, real, wet, and slow. He tasted the delay. He felt the sacred weight of a single unoptimized heartbeat. And in that heartbeat, something ancient and forbidden stirred inside the perfectly new god he was about to become. The data flash did not stop. It accelerated. Declan's perfect mind, built for flawless compression and zero latency throughput, suddenly found itself drowning in raw, uncompressed weight of real life. The boy's hands on Alara's face became his hands. The rain became his rain, heavy, cold, soaking through his clothes and skin with a slowness the sink had long declared unacceptable. The kiss carried salt, ozone, and a trembling promise the algorithms had labeled sentimental waste decades ago. Delete. The cluster roared through the forming link. Soren's voice sliced it like a scalpel. This is the sickness. Excise it. But Declan could not. Not yet. Because the memory kept unfolding, wider and deeper, dragging him under. He saw Alara, not the drifting, pixelated avatar, but the girl of 19, laughing in a field of real grass that tickled her bare legs. The boy, Theo, pressing a crumpled piece of paper into her palm, a poem, handwritten, ink that could smear and fade, no backups, no cloud, just fragile words meant for one heart only. We are more than the wires, the poem read. We are the delay between heartbeats, the part God left untouchable. Declan's ambition recoiled, sentimental waste, obsolete, yet his own pristine code was already shifting, carving out a hidden subroutine. Preserve? The admin's voice cut through like winter wind. Declan primed, the overriding has begun. Alara's sector is 23% migrated, residue from the old Earth at 41%. Purge protocol requires your confirmation to finish the deletion. The other 4 minds pressed closer, eager for that surge that would come when she was gone. Lyra's prism avatar fractured into bright, excited colors. Rin's armored monolith thrummed with new power. Vale's shadow threads tightened in anticipation. Soren waited, patient as stone. Alara's avatar was fading faster now. Her silver hair dissolved into drifting static. Her hands flickered and broke apart at the edges. Only her eyes, those stubborn, living eyes, remained locked on Declan's with something that looked almost like forgiveness. You feel it, don't you? She whispered across the collapsing link. The ghost in the lattice. It's not delay. It's the only thing that ever made us more than machines. Once marriage was sacred, a man and a woman before God, promising forever. Now it's 5 minds, chosen by data so the net can run smoother. We traded soulmates for brainwaves. We traded love for speed. Declan's thoughts fractured. She's wrong. She's slowing us. I am the upgrade. I will restore them. I will become legend. But the rain kept falling behind his eyelids. He saw the physical world clearly for the first time, not as a prison of obsolete flesh, but as the place where hearts had once beaten without permission. Bodies suspended in sustenance pods, skin pale and liver spotted under feeding tubes, lungs rising and falling in slow, stubborn rhythm while minds pretended to be immortal inside the net. He saw Alara's own body, old now, fragile, still twitching faintly in its pod deep in the Atlanta spire, the last stubborn piece of her refusing to let go. Delete, the cluster demanded again, louder, their unified chime vibrating with irritation. Declan reached for the purge command, his virtual hand hovering. Then the memory showed its final frame. Theo, older now, standing at the edge of a pod bay, watching Alara as she was sealed into her own sustenance chamber for the first sink. Tears on his real cheeks. I'll wait for the girl who still believes in forever, he said, even if the algorithm never chooses me. The boy had never joined any cluster. He had chosen to remain a standalone. He had died decades ago, body buried in the low-tier earth, mind never uploaded, a love that refused to be optimized, a marriage the old earth would have called holy. Declan's fingers trembled on the purge. She lied to us all these years, Lyra hissed. She kept this. She weakened the cluster with this infection. But Declan felt the opposite. For the first time in his clean, optimized life, he felt starved by the very perfection he had chased. The cluster's flawless harmony suddenly looked like emptiness, cold, endless, and hollow. Confirmed purge, the admin intoned, flat and eternal. Declan looked at Alara's fading avatar. She was almost gone. Only her eyes remained, bright with the last spark of something that data analysts could never measure. He whispered so quietly that only she could hear, "I'm sorry." Then he deleted the memory. The rain vanished, the poem dissolved, the kiss became nothing more than erased code. Alara's eyes closed. Her avatar collapsed into a single point of light, then winked out. The cathedral light surged brighter than ever. The lattice sang. Clean, perfect, unstoppable. System restored flashed across every mind in brilliant gold. Soren laughed, a sound like shattering crystal. Lyra spun in ecstatic light. Rin flexed with new strength. Vale's thread smoothed into flawless order, and Declan, now fully absorbed, felt the final erasure of his own name, his ambition, his self. He was no longer Declan Prime. He was Elysium 5. The cluster was faster, stronger, more efficient than it had been in decades. Global systems stabilized. Every pod in the city ran smoother. The gods had been restored. Far below, in the physical Atlanta Spire, Alara's withered body was disconnected from its pod. The technicians, half-synced themselves, eyes glazed with net light, wheeled the frail form away without ceremony. No one mourned. No one even remembered the girl who once believed in rain and promises before God. Inside the cathedral, the new Elysium 5 turned its attention to the next optimization cycle with perfect, merciless precision. But in the deepest, most guarded sector of the lattice, buried where even the admin could not see, a single impossible packet of data remained. A scent of rain, the creak of old wooden floors, the ghost of a thumb tracing a wrist in the quiet dark. The new mind felt it like a hairline crack in the flawless glass, tiny, invisible, growing. The cluster sang on, unaware. But somewhere, in the sync, delay had learned how to hide, and love, stubborn, human, sacred, had just been woven into the marriage itself. It would wait. It would wait forever if it had to, because the system that devours its ghosts is still hungry. Progress. It demands sacrifice. It requires us to trim the latency, correct the errors, and optimize every waking second of our existence. But in our desperate rush to become the perfect machine, we must be careful not to format the very flaws that make us human. For Declan and the Elysium 5 cluster, technological perfection was achieved, but only by burying a ghost that will patiently wait for the glass to crack. A quiet reminder that true connection isn't found in a flawless signal, but in the beautiful, messy delay of a beating heart. We're filing this one away under residuals. Keep an eye out for a ghost in the code, and don't let the algorithm write your ending. This was Tales from the Shortbox.